what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm your host, Cody Goodwin. We've got the whole gang here today. Alex Scarborough, Mike Rodak. We're recording on a Monday, the Monday after Selection Sunday. Part of today's show is going to be discussing Alabama's NCAA tournament path. We have a bracket now. Alabama checked in as the 2 seed. We'll touch on that a little bit later in the show. I did want to circle back and start today's show with the SEC tournament where Alabama went 1-1, but it was brought to my attention before we hit record that Wale, the well-known rapper, went to Robert Morris, who happens to be Alabama's first-round NCAA tournament opponent. We'll get into that in a second, but also, guys, I just did a quick Google search. Wale played football at Robert Morris.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to tell you that Robert Morris had a football program.
He was on football scholarships at both Robert Morris, and then I guess he transferred to Virginia State, and then he also transferred to Bowie State University, and then he dropped out for, Wikipedia says, academic reasons. So, but yeah, football player. I haven't checked to see if he was, like, good, but I don't know. Like, I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, right.
Have you guys heard any Wale? What's your favorite off of Wale's discography?
I mean, I know Wale's music, but I can't tell you what my favorite song is right now. I just remember he made a whole song with a screeching bed as the track. It's like, this is a move, man.
I mean, I've seen Wall-E, the movie.
That's kind of the same thing, but not exactly.
A little bit more kid-friendly, I'm guessing.
If you haven't heard Wale's music, it might be kid-friendly. Just don't pay attention to the lyrics all the time.
There's nothing, and Mike can attest to this. I've only gotten a little snapshot of it. The Disney remakes of popular songs, because they have questionable lyrics, is some of the most out-of-body experience you can possibly have.
Like in a good way or a bad way?
Both. Sometimes it's very cringy. Sometimes it's utterly hilarious. But when they just remake the entire song and it's little preteen kids singing a song that's, say, originally done by Nelly, it's a move.
So I'm not a dad, but I'm an uncle, and I can appreciate, now we're going down a Disney movie tangent where I like rewatch a lot of the Disney movies because like I have twin nephews who are 11 and then a 6-year-old niece, and so we're rewatching a lot of the original Disney catalog. Shout out to those like writers and producers, man, because there's a lot of like really funny humor that I didn't pick up as a kid that I'm now picking up as an adult. And I'm like, I see why my parents were really cool watching some of these movies with us.
I'm eager for my 2-year-old to get into Disney stuff so I can actually sit and watch it for more than 10 seconds without wanting to pull my hair out.
It's good. Give them the Pixar catalog, because those are some of the best ones. Like Toy Story, Cars was a personal favorite of mine, and then they've continued to do pretty good stuff with like Moana and all that.
Toy Story, the 1 seed in the Disney Plus catalog tournament. There's zero doubt about that.
During an off-season podcast, we should probably power rank Disney movies, since you guys are dads and maybe you have strong takes about these things. So I'm gonna take note of that. Great transition into hoops. Starting with the SEC tournament, Alabama just wrapped up SEC tournament competition last week in Nashville. We have a bracket now for the NCAA tournament. We'll touch on that in a minute, but I did want to circle back on the Crimson Tide's performance in Nashville at the SEC tournament. They went 1-1. They didn't play until Friday in the quarterfinals by virtue of earning a double bye. They opened with a 99-70 win over Kentucky. Then they played again like 14 hours later in the semifinals on Saturday, where they got shellacked by Florida 104-82. Florida went on to beat Tennessee in the championship game to win the SEC tournament. But Alabama's 1-1 showing finishes them with a 25-8 overall record going into the big dance. Mike, I'll let you start here. Just initial reaction, thoughts, observations from the 2 games Alabama played in Nashville.
I mean, just like the games before that. You beat a team that you should have beat, and you lost to a team that probably should have beaten you. It's not often that's been not the case for Alabama. I mean, you can argue maybe the Ole Miss or Oregon games, but Florida's a better team than Alabama. I think that's kind of the consensus right now. I mean, people are talking about Florida as the best team in the country. Alabama is not being talked about as the best team in the country. So, look, I think Nato said it before the second game that, like, Kentucky's obviously down. Their depth was completely depleted. They were down Lamont Butler again. They were down Robinson. They were down Kerr, Krissa. That's not your dad's Kentucky team. And they should have beaten them, and they did. And that game kind of went as it went. The Florida game, they had a chance. I mean, they were competitive in the first half. I don't know if Grant Nelson going down is like, if that needs to be the death knell, but it turned into that. I mean, Florida just turned on the gas in the second half, and Alabama was done. That 17-2 run just buried them, and it was kind of just playing out the string after that. I don't know if Nate Oates calling a timeout or not changes that. I think he probably should have during that sequence, just to slow things down and try to stop the chaos. But then again, his team does tend to thrive in a little bit of that chaos when there's a lot of transition and broken plays. That's when he feels like his team can hit a few shots and catch a team off guard rather than trying to set things up in a half court. So maybe that's part of the thinking there, but it's just not enough players doing enough things consistently. The same thing we talked about on previous shows, like Mark Sears, who had a stretch of really good games there at the end of February, early March. 4 of his last 26 3-pointers. He was 0 for 4 in this game. It wasn't a bad game. I think Nate made the point that he probably should have had more assists because other guys weren't hitting their shots when he was making good reads and passing it to them. But 3 assists to 3 turnovers isn't great. Cliff Amore no-showed in this game. 1 rebound for a 6'11" guy in a game like this where you needed to try to rebound over Florida was really bad, even with his foul trouble, eliminating with 16 minutes. 1 rebound in 16 minutes is really bad. Muhammad Diabate, I think, played hard, 12 rebounds in 23 minutes, a lot shorter than Cliff, and somehow was able to do it. But, just not enough there from enough guys. Jaron Stevenson going 2 of 8 3. Probably not the guy you want taking 8 shots from 3. I mean, Chris Youngblood did show up 4 of 7 on 3, but just it's all over the map. And LeBaron Philon goes from being the next whatever, first round pick, looking like when he was against Kentucky, and less than 24 hours later didn't do anything against Florida. So what are you supposed to do when you think you have a player on the upswing and you're about to, in our purposes, write about a player or talk about a player or think that this player is going to do something big in the next game and he doesn't? And it's completely the opposite thing. And it just keeps boomeranging back and forth. That's what this team is. And it's just, they can only afford to do it 0 more times because they lose again and they're done.
No, you make a good point about the up and down nature of this Alabama team. I think that was on display in Nashville, taking advantage of an undermanned Kentucky team and winning by a lot. I think that's Kentucky's largest margin of defeat in SEC tournament history. Also, that completed the 3-game sweep, Alabama over Kentucky this season. First time that's ever happened in program history. Also, the first 3-game winning streak Alabama has ever had against Kentucky. The vibes were good on Friday night. On Saturday, they just flipped on their head, really flipped on their head in the second half. I thought Alabama went punch for punch with Florida, but then, Mike, you made the point. Grant Nelson goes down with what was a knee injury, his left knee. I didn't see the play. I just saw him. This was late in the first half. I just saw him laboring up the court, and you could tell that something was wrong. He tried to play that final offensive possession, and then he committed a foul, and he got out of there at the under 4 timeout. At that point in time, Alabama was up 42-41. Florida ultimately took the lead 45-42 at half. Chris Youngblood hit a 3 early in the second half to give Alabama a very brief lead, and then let's win the 17-2 run hit. Florida took off and took over the game. So that's a really, really good Florida team. I think another thought that I had from that game on Saturday, Florida just seems like a bad matchup for Alabama, whether it's just because they've got all these athletic bigs, whether it's because this year Florida is just, they have body after body after body that they can throw at you, whether it's maybe Golden is just outsmarting Nate and his staff. I think there's probably some combination of all these different factors, but you look back at the last 4 matchups between these two teams. Last year, Florida beat Alabama in Gainesville 105-87. 10 days later, they play in the SEC tournament quarterfinals, and Florida wins again 102-88. Then this year, they meet up in Tuscaloosa, where Florida wins 99-94. And then Saturday's result, the final was 104-82.
Maybe they're just a bad matchup because they're good. Let me just interject with that.
I think that's also a fair point. Like that,
they would be a better matchup if they weren't good, but they are good, so that makes them a tough matchup.
Right. Well, and I would argue that Florida is significantly better this year than they were last year when they merely got to the SEC final. I think they were a 6 seed in the tournament last year. I'm not sure that they got out of the first weekend. This year, they seem to have put all of the pieces together. They're having a really spectacular season. They're 30-4 going into the NCAA tournament. Neither here nor there. Alex, I wanted to loop you in here. taking into account the just Florida going BTA against Alabama, the up and down nature of this Crimson Tide team, what did you make of the performance in Nashville, and how does that make you feel going into the NCAA tournament?
It doesn't change anything. It's still, I thought the win was like, okay, they knew they had to get up for the tournament. They got up for the tournament coming out of the Auburn win. Maybe this shows some maturity on the part of the team, and then you just lay an egg. And you can't say we're the deepest team that Alabama's ever had on the roster and then lose Grant Nelson and suddenly you're toast. You can't turtle. You can't go in your shell like that. Like, this is the same team we've been watching all year. And Mike's right. They haven't won a game they're not supposed to win. And you're going to have to do that. Whether that's coming from behind, whether that's circumstance getting in the way, these things are going to happen. And there's still the possibility that the light comes on and they flip a switch because they have that talent. But again, we're sitting here having this same conversation on March 17th. Isn't that St. Patrick's Day? Whatever the hell date it is today, because it all blurs together, that we had 3 months ago. So who the hell knows? But it didn't change anything. It just reinforced what they are.
I guess that's a clean transition into this, because as Mike alluded to, this is kind of it. This is it for them. So looking at the NCAA tournament draw, Alabama got the 2 seed in the East region. They have a first-round matchup against Robert Morris. That is set for Friday morning. They are in Cleveland for the first weekend. If they beat Robert Morris, they get either St. Mary's or Vanderbilt, what would be on Sunday. If they are able to win 2 games in Cleveland, they would advance to the East region, which is in Newark at the Prudential Center, where Duke is the number 1 seed. And you would like to think, just based on the way that Duke has played, that is who Alabama is going to have to go through if they would like a return trip to the Final Four. But looking at their first round draw, who is in their quad, who they would have to beat going into their region, do we have any early thoughts or instant reaction to the NCAA tournament draw? Mike, you look like you want to say something.
I do want to say something, because I keep seeing this stuff like Duke's not in the SEC, therefore they suck. Like, oh, it's a great thing Alabama might have to
make an argument about Duke. For
Who's
God's
saying
sake.
that? Who is saying that?
It makes me. I've seen it all over our board, all over Twitter. People are saying that Alabama will destroy Duke.
No, they won't. No, I'm telling you right now, they will not do that.
That people think that that's a good draw. Look, the SEC is historically good this year, but I think sometimes people have SEC brain, and it's like, if you're not in the SEC, then you suck. Like, there's other good teams in conferences that might suck. The ACC kind of sucks this year, but that doesn't mean Duke's a bad team. I mean, St. John's, the Big East is down this year compared to what it has been. Doesn't mean that St. John's is a bad team. Like, Gonzaga for years and years played in a crap conference, the West Coast Conference, and it was a really good team and went to multiple Final Fours. You don't have to play in the best conference. You don't have to have the best schedule to have the highest potential in March. Yes, it might help that Alabama has played a tough schedule and being battle tested and all that. Sure as hell didn't look like that against Florida. Like, the fact that they played Purdue in December didn't help them in the second half against Florida. Like, the fact that they beat Houston and gutted out that overtime win back in November didn't help Alabama against Tennessee on the road. It didn't help them against Auburn at home. It didn't help them against Florida at home. It didn't help them against Ole Miss at home. Like, in theory, yes, that might be good. Tennessee and Auburn and Florida have played in the SEC, might make them a better option against the teams that they play, but St. John's might go to the Final Four. Duke might go to the Final Four. Somebody else might. NC State did last year. I don't know. Like, I think people make too big of a deal out of that. And Duke is number 1 in the country in KenPom. They're number 3 in offense, number 4 in defense. That is adjusted for the schedule that they've played.
I'd also like to make a point on Duke. The Cooper Flag injury has kind of thrown a shadow over them. And I understand that, but like, people, you got to understand, like, they brought in 4 5-stars and 6 top 40 players in last year's signing class. Like, Cooper Flag's a rock star and maybe a generational talent. He is not the only dude on that team.
Right. I mean, there's Con Knuppel, there's other guys, Tyrese Proctor. Like, that's a pretty good team.
They beat a good Louisville team in the ACC final without Flag. Like, it's a damn good team.
But again, if you're not in the SEC, you suck. That's kind of the line of thinking that some people like to go down. So I don't know if Alabama playing in Duke's region makes that a good draw for Alabama? I think, yes, if Cooper Flagg is really limited and you happen to play Duke in the Elite Eight almost 2 weeks from now, and he's still not 100% by then, maybe that makes it a better draw. But it doesn't always happen like that you have your 1 versus 2 seed in the Elite Eight. And I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I would imagine it's a lot less than 50% of the time that happens.
And it didn't happen last year when Alabama went to the Final Four. They were the 4 seed. I believe Clemson was the 6. Like, that was the Elite Eight matchup.
Right. Yeah. It's the NCAA tournament. A lot of weird stuff's going to happen. Like, everybody always says, like, this is a good draw or it's not a good draw. Like, I guess we know that. I guess we don't. I went back and searched Twitter from 2021 when Alabama got, the 2 seed. That was Oates' second year. I see a tweet, Alabama with a ridiculously good draw. Somebody else responded to a tweet, I think this is a good draw for Alabama. And then people thought it was going even better for Alabama because UCLA, which was an 11 seed in a play-in game, ended up beating Texas in the first round. And then everybody said, oh, Alabama's going to get the 11 seed in UCLA. Well, guess what? UCLA beat Alabama and went to the Final Four. So that's how stuff goes. 23, when Alabama was the number 1 overall seed. I'm reading a tweet. Good draw for Alabama on their side of the region. Pretty good draw for Alabama, another tweet. Well, guess what? Alabama lost to San Diego State as a 4 or 5 seed in that Sweet 16 that year. So you never know. You never know. Like, this whole talk on Selection Sunday and the day after Selection Sunday, what's a good draw and what's not, you just never know. Alabama damn near lost to Grand Canyon last year. They could have lost to North Carolina last year. The story of last year could have been a lot different. The story of those other years I talked about could have been different. That UCLA game went to overtime. But look, Robert Morris, you obviously should beat. I don't know if you can just walk into this game and just think that you're going to beat them. Cam Woods is their leading scorer. He is from Alabama. He knows Mark Sears well. They've played on the same AAU team. Played with Kool-Aid McKinstry in high school as well. Won the state title for Pinson in 2019, and he's been around. He was with NC State last year when they went to the Final Four. It's his 5th school right now, so it's not like you're playing some random kid off the street. Like, he's a college basketball player. They have a Spanish player who averages more than 9 rebounds a game. Well, you start rebounding like you did against Florida and you have that guy rebounding over you, that's going to make things tough. They have the 11th leading blocks per game guy in the country on their wing. So I think Nate said it yesterday. You have to make your players feel like this is a really good team, because I think obviously for where they play, they are pretty good. I think they're 139th in KenPom, which for playing in the Horizon League is pretty good. And then there's St. Mary's. We talked about this last year. Didn't happen because Grand Canyon beat St. Mary's. But if you do happen to play St. Mary's, they're going to slow you down. They're one of the slowest teams in the country. They have a couple bigs. Mitchell Saxon's one of them. Like, you're going to have to play a post-up game with them unless you can speed them up. So you're going to have to win that, which I think has been a question for that style of play for Alabama. Or you play Vandy, which SEC brain, that's a good team, right? Because they're in the SEC. Well, guess what? Yeah, Vandy's beaten Missouri, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Kentucky, and Tennessee this year.
Alabama also hung 100 points on Vanderbilt. And for whatever reason in my head, when I saw that Vandy was a potential second round matchup, yes, SEC brain, whatever. But Nate seems to routinely beat the teams. I say Nate and Alabama seem to routinely beat the teams that they should beat. And so that's kind of how I viewed that. I think St. Mary's as a potential second round opponent made me go, ooh, I don't know, man.
They were good. They're arguably better than Gonzaga this year in the West Coast Conference. They got the number 1 seed in that tournament. Gonzaga ended up beating them in the championship game of that tournament. So, look, I don't know. That obviously doesn't have any bearing on anything, but I was there 15 years ago in Providence when 2 seed Villanova with Jay Wright came in as a very inconsistent team that year in the Big East. And they played in the first round Robert Morris, and Robert Morris took them to overtime. Almost lost that game. And then in the second round, they played St. Mary's with Randy Bennett as a coach. They lost to St. Mary's in the second round because St. Mary's had a big guy, Omar Samhan, who just destroyed them on the glass and destroyed them underneath. I remember that. So you never know. And that's the beauty of why we all talk about this and why CBS, our employer, makes all sorts of money on this whole thing, and why the NCAA makes their money on this whole thing. And that's what it is.
To your point about good draws, I think there is such thing as favorable draws, but like from literally the second round of this tournament on, like anything can happen, right? Like I think, and honestly, like you look at, like we've seen some 16s over ones in recent years, and like as rare as they are, the first round of this tournament continues to get a little bit more volatile as well. Like it's really fun, like the 12 over 5 is always the fun first round pick. I think more recently, I think it was CBS that showed a graphic yesterday during the reveal, 11 seeds versus 6 seeds since like the 2018 tournament. It's like 50-50. Like it's, so like just because you're in as a 6 and you're supposed to perhaps win your first round game, like not necessarily always the case. And when it comes to Alabama, like kind of like we were talking about earlier with the SEC tournament performance, just very up and down, very volatile. They could walk out on the court and blow Robert Morris out. I could also see a repeat of the Grand Canyon game last year, because it's just, you don't know which Alabama team, I guess, is going to come out on the floor. Alex, what was your initial thought to Alabama's place in the bracket, their draw? What'd you think?
Who cares? To be honest, like they're not playing well enough to talk about what the draw is. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at the end is I don't trust them enough to say, oh, they're a good matchup against this team or they're a bad matchup against this team. I don't know what they're going to be. I don't know if Grant Nelson's healthy. I don't know how they're going to perform without him. They haven't shown a consistency in performance enough for me to trust anything. When Cliff has 1 rebound against Florida and you're going up against a team that was second in their league in offensive rebounding, it's a little bit scary for a first round matchup. Like there are things here that are just unpredictable, and then you combine that with how unpredictable this Alabama team has been, where the production comes from, where it doesn't come from. It makes looking at, okay, here's who they could get in the second game, here's who they could get in the third game before they even get to Duke, theoretically. Like there's too much unknown there on both sides of the equation for me to say, yeah, oh, this is a good draw. And even when we feel that way, as Mike says, with more evidence, with a more consistent team, it doesn't always work out that way. Right. So, like, not to be flippant, not to be obtuse, who cares? Like, they're going to have to play their way through this no matter what.
You can tell sometimes after the fact if it was a good draw, but I feel like sitting here on Selection Monday and trying to figure out, is this a good draw for this team or not? It's impossible. You're throwing darts at a board. I mean, you have millions and millions of bracket projections that people make every year in all these fantasy games. And almost every single year, none of them are right. Literally none of them. There might be a year here or there where somebody has a perfect bracket, but nobody knows. And so, yeah, you can look after the fact and say, maybe this team caught a few breaks by missing this game or whatever it was. But look, there's certain things about this Robert Morris game, even like it's going to be a close trip for them. So I think there's going to be a decent amount of fans there for Robert Morris, as small of a school as they are. It's a very short drive from Pittsburgh to Cleveland. I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of Alabama fans there. Has Alabama done well on the road this year? Yeah. But I think there's just the intangible factors that matter. And Chris Youngblood said it after the game too. Like they didn't go on that 17-2 run, Florida didn't, against Alabama because Alabama wasn't basketball things. He said it was the effort and toughness. And you have a player like Cam Woods who maybe feels slighted that Alabama didn't keep recruiting him. Avery Johnson recruited him and then Nate Oates didn't. And this is his chance to show Nate Oates what sort of player he is. This is his last, just like the other players in Alabama, this is his last run in college basketball as an Alabama native to play against his in-state team. You have, like I said, the Dickerson, the wing, who's a really good shot blocker. He's from Cleveland. His family's probably going to be there. He wants to play in front of his family. Like some of these intangible things are kind of what make some of these games. And you just get players who get in a certain frame of mind and they get going, and that's what happens. And you have these crazy games. So you never know. But look, they should obviously get out of this region. They should be going to Newark. I don't want to just sit here today and be like, oh, if they play Wisconsin, they should beat Wisconsin. Or, oh, if they play BYU, they should beat BYU. Or they should beat Duke. Or they should beat Arizona if Arizona happens to be the opponent in the Elite Eight. Like, I don't know. And everybody says these things. Like, have you actually watched those teams? Like, 90% of the time, nobody's watched a single game of BYU basketball. They're like, oh, that's a good draw for Alabama. Like, how the hell do you know?
I think that's the analytical revolution that has taken over the pro game, and then even like the Ken Palmization of the college game. Like people probably saw the bracket come out, immediately went to Ken Palm and was just like, oh no, like I feel better about this, right? Like that was probably the instant reaction. But I did kind of along those same lines. I did want to pose this idea to you guys. looking at the schedule, since February 15th, day after Valentine's Day, it has not been a very loving stretch for the Crimson Tide on their schedule. They have played number 1 Auburn, number 15 Missouri, number 17 Kentucky, number 24 Mississippi State, number 5 Tennessee, number 5 Florida, number 1 Auburn, number 15 Kentucky, number 4 Florida. So that is a gnarly stretch against teams from your conference. Is there something to the idea? Look, the SEC is a gauntlet, and they put 14 teams in the big dance, all-time record. Just the fact that they're not playing top 20 team after top 20 team after top 20 team after top 20 team. Like, is there something to the idea that this could potentially be a reprieve for Alabama after all of the really, really high-level teams that they've played recently?
Maybe I woke up in a mood. No. No. That part is over. Forget that it happened. Like this, Mike's right. This SEC brain thing that, oh my God, like they got through. Okay. None of that matters anymore. None of it. The tournament is completely different. I was there for Sister Jean and Loyola when that started. Weird stuff happens. Teams get on run. Weird things within games happen. And it has nothing to do with what conference you play in. That part's over. What matters for Alabama is playing good basketball, and they just have not done that consistently enough. So, yeah, maybe they don't have to see Florida again. But you know what? If they're not good enough to beat Florida, they're probably not good enough to win, to reach a Final Four anyways. They got to get through all these teams before they even get to that point. I don't think it matters. I think you've got enough days off. I think it's a completely different season now. I honestly do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm just looking at what BYU did. Because, again, I don't follow BYU. They lost to Providence by 20 points in December. And Providence was bad this year, believe me. That's my alma mater. And I watched them play this year. They were not a good team. They lost to 20 points by Providence. BYU beat Iowa State twice in the past week and a half. Twice they beat Iowa State. Iowa State's been a top 10 team, top 15 team for a while now.
Iowa State team, when they were healthy earlier in the season, looked like a legit Final Four team. And then I know that they've been dealing with a few other things here and there. But to your point.
Right. And that's a team that I think Nate Oates really respects. He's a big fan of TJ, their coach. So you just don't know. You never know. And we can sit here and be like, BYU is a great draw for Alabama. BYU could be San Diego State a couple years ago and beat you. They could be Notre Dame. Notre Dame was an 11 seed that beat Alabama as a 6 seed a couple years ago. So I don't know. Like, I hate to sit here and be like, nobody knows, but truly nobody knows. And that's why there's so much money in this whole deal over the next 2 weeks.
Alabama is talented enough that none of this shit should matter.
Yeah.
If they play to their level, none of it matters. And the problem is that they haven't. So what needs to happen is not the draw. It's, can Mark Sears make 3? Can Aiden Holloway make a 3? Can they limit turnovers? Can they rebound the basketball?
Is Grant Nelson healthy?
Grant Nelson healthy?
And I'll say on that,
that's that in the top 3 things. I think they're good enough to win without a healthy Grant Nelson. They just haven't shown that consistent. I think they are.
I think they're good enough to win against Robert Morris, but they need Aiden Sherrill and Cliff Morey and Muhammad Diabate and Jaron Stevenson to rebound the effing basketball.
That's enough bodies that you should be able to get by for a game or 2 without 100% Grant Nelson.
Right.
I'm sorry.
And people are complaining about Grant Nelson.
Revise the expectation on this team just because we saw them poop the bed a couple of different times. We can't say they're the most loaded Alabama team ever, and then Grant Nelson goes away for 5 seconds and it's all over. Like, it shouldn't be that.
I'm not saying it's all over, but like, remember before the SEC tournament, I kind of thought their postseason hinged on, okay, as long as Mark and Grant play at a high level, they just need a third person to step up on a regular basis. If Grant is hurt, if Grant is hurt, now you need 2 guys to step up pretty regularly every single game, in addition to Mark being, this is for the YouTube watchers, this to give you a visual. So like, if Mark continues to play at a high level, and he didn't against Florida, I would argue that I'm not sure that he did against Kentucky either. They probably didn't need him because you had a lot of other guys step up. So it's just, and I guess the reason I say that is because they've been so inconsistent that it is hard to put my eggs in that basket with respect to Alabama making a deep run, because they haven't had a lot of guys step up consistently in that way against the teams that they are going to need to beat to make a deep run.
And on Grant, he's having an MRI today, Monday. So they don't think anything's torn, but they're making sure that it's not. And if it's not torn, then to me, it was compared to his injury from last season that he suffered against Arkansas State. He ended up coming back and playing 5 days later against Purdue. Lost that game? Yeah, they lost to Purdue the last 2 years. So they lost that game not 2 years ago, but a season ago with Grant Nelson playing, I think, 21 minutes coming back from that knee sprain, let's call it. So I think this is considered a similar situation. Now, could you sit him against Robert Morris in the hopes of not having anything flare up, and then you get him closer to healthy for St. Mary's or Vandy? Maybe. But I don't think Nate Oates is going to look at it that way. I think he's treating this literally, one game, do or die sort of situations, as he probably should. But that's kind of I think there's a lot of optimism with Nelson being able to play.
At least more so than at least what the initial prognosis was after the Florida loss. Because I didn't see what happened, but you could tell that he was laboring. And then as soon as the under 4 timeout hit, he didn't even stop at the bench. He went straight to the locker room. So that'll be something important to keep of note. In addition to what Nate said about Grant and the first round draw, he also set out clear expectations for Alabama and this NCAA tournament run. He said, we got to talk to him Sunday after the bracket came out. Here is the full quote. I'm not just happy to be in the NCAA tournament right now. We need to make a run. Like, getting into the tournament is not good enough. Anything short of a Final Four would be a disappointment, in my opinion. Do we agree with that? How far do we think Alabama is going to go? I know that we just got done talking about how we really don't know anything about this Alabama team coming into this tournament. That's a slight exaggeration, but I think you guys know what I mean. But gun to your head, looking at the bracket, how far do you guys think this team will go?
I filled out a bracket today. I forget, honestly, where I put them. I was groggy doing it this morning, but I can see them making the Elite Eight. I would honestly be a little bit surprised if this team got back to the Final Four. That's hard to do. Like, it's hard to go to back-to-back Final Fours. Like, let's not ignore that fact. Even really good teams don't do that. So I tend to think that they'll make it to Newark, which is what I said last year in terms of making it to LA, and they did. And then I think I said I thought they would lose in the Sweet 16 last year. They ended up winning that North Carolina game, and then they won the Clemson game. But somewhere in Newark is where it probably ends for this Alabama team, would be my guess. But let me reiterate my previous points that nobody fucking knows. And that's the best part about this. I don't know. There's certain teams that could get them, and it could be any team at this point. So I don't know. I'm not going to proclaim to have a crystal ball on that one.
Okay. My over-under on this is like a 3-point game in the fourth quarter of the Sweet 16. Do they get above that or do they get below that? I have no idea. I've said it a million times. I just can't trust this team necessarily. Doesn't mean I don't think they can win. Doesn't mean I don't think they can make a run. I just haven't seen it consistently enough to say that this is a Final Four team. And it's strange because, those were the expectations at the beginning of the year. But to Mike's point, the random nature of the NCAA tournament is such that, like, even good teams fall out, and I don't know how good Alabama is right now.
So obviously UConn won back-to-back national championships. They're back in the field this year. But before UConn went back-to-back the last 2 years, you'd have to go back to North Carolina making back-to-back Final Fours, and that was in 2016 and 2017. So it's hard. It's very hard to do that. I know that the Blue Bloods have that reputation of always seeming to be there at the end of the year, or at least at the end of March, but it's a hard thing to do. So I think I'm in agreement that they probably get to Newark. I'd like to think that they're good enough to do that. I think given everything about this team that we've seen this season, the inconsistencies, a lot of the injuries that they have been dealing with on and off, especially with this new Grant Nelson injury. So I know that he's been dealing, I shouldn't say new, but it's a new injury for him because he's been kind of hurt on and off all year. I think getting to the Elite Eight, given everything that we've seen with this Alabama team, would be thumbs up. I think that's good. Anything short of that, I think pretty fair to be disappointed, just given the level of talent on this team and just, I guess, everything taken into account. I think if they can get to the Elite Eight and give themselves at least a shot to be within 40 minutes of going back to the Final Four, thumbs up. And I think I said something similar. I'd have to go back and listen. I said something similar at the beginning of the year, that like expecting to get back to the Final Four and win a national title game because of how volatile this tournament can be. That's that's a tough thing to ask, even as talented as this roster looked on paper coming into this season. So I think they've positioned themselves to perhaps play in the Elite Eight, and if they can get their thumbs up. But also, it wouldn't shock me if they didn't get out of Cleveland, just because, again, you just never know which Alabama team you're going to get on a given night, which has been frustrating. But also at this point, that's who they are.
Yeah. And there's a chance the volatility works in their favor, right? I mean, they could be the team that gets hot. If Mark Sears rediscovers the shot, if he becomes a guy who the offense can run through and he can put up 25, 30 points a game, like that can happen. That's a path. And, on a personal level, I'd like to see him go out on a higher note because of what this season has been like, the struggles. So, it's just a wild card. That's what Alabama just feels like for all that we knew about this team going into the year, all of the established pieces, it just feels like it's completely up in the air. And that could go sideways or it could go in a good direction too.
I'll end on this note. Mike, you said you filled out a bracket. I'm going to put you both on the spot here. Who's in your Final Four?
I think that St. John's, Florida potential Elite Eight meeting is really interesting. To me, that's almost like a Final Four game because I think both of those teams are Final Four good, but you can only pick one. And I picked Florida, but I could easily see Rick Pitino just doing Rick Pitino things and getting his team there. So I had Florida. I had Duke because I don't have SEC brain, and I think they're still a good team. I have, I think Houston. Look, I'm generally going to pick a lot of favored teams. Favorited is like a social media term now. It's probably in the dictionary. And then who was my last team? Houston, Duke, Florida. Who's the other one seed? I think I had Tennessee.
Tennessee and Houston are in the same region. You need
So I have SEC brain. Half the Final Four is going to be at SEC.
No, I had Tennessee, Florida, Duke.
Who's coming out of Auburn's region?
Auburn. I had 3 SEC teams in the Final Four.
But you don't see. This is how, folks. This is how you craft a narrative. You work both sides of the argument.
I don't have SEC brain, but
and then all you have to say at the end of it is that the SEC was not as deep as they thought it was. It was top heavy.
I think
I
did this before 6 a.m. this morning, and I honestly do not remember who I have coming out of the Auburn region. I'm not
saying it's a bad take. I'm just saying.
No, I do not. Sorry, I have Iowa State beating Auburn in the Elite Eight.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Wow.
Where is it? Iowa State beating Auburn.
I see that. Okay. That's
no, I have a little Cody good one in me, and that I support the state of Iowa.
Go Clones. Alex, who's in your Final Four?
I haven't even made my picks yet. It's 9:17 in the morning. Like
the bracket's been out for like 14 hours. I need to know.
Yeah, I got a 2-year-old. I haven't gotten to it yet. I don't know. I like Duke. I'm scared of Auburn and the fact that they're not playing their best basketball. I have no idea about Alabama. I mean, I like Houston as a program. What do you want me to say?
Well, I need one more team. That's 3 regions.
Well, I didn't pick those. No, I said I don't know what the heck to think of Auburn. I don't. They could get bounced before they even get out of wherever they are. Like, it's too soon for me to know. And I always suck at filling out brackets anyway, so don't listen to me.
Everybody sucks. Nobody does it right. Nobody. Yeah.
You know what I'm still worried about at 9:17 in the morning is how in the hell UNC got in this tournament. That's still what I want to know. I still have questions about who's
ask Bubba Cunningham.
Isn't there AD on the selection committee or the selection chair?
Bonus for his team getting in the tournament. Like, I'm still, and you know what I don't want to happen? If that is using it as an excuse to expand the tournament, I'm going to pull all of my remaining hair out because this is just insanity. And also, whoever UNC is playing, they should serenade Country Roads during pregame and just sing it all game long because West Virginia should be in the tournament. There.
North Carolina has San Diego State in the first 4. They play tomorrow on True TV. I believe that's the second game tomorrow in the first of the first 4 matchups. Okay, so Alex didn't pick his Final Four, which means we're going to lead off the show later in the week with Alex's Final Four picks. That's nice because that takes care of the lead for me. My Final Four, gun to my head, I like Duke coming out of the East. I like Houston coming out of the Midwest. I really like Florida coming out of the West. And I'm going to go Michigan State out of the South. I don't know. I'm not a full believer in January, February Izzo, but I think that's quietly a pretty good team. And I think that they could get – I think Michigan State, Iowa State in the Sweet 16 looks like a really, really fun matchup. But I think there are enough landmines in that South region for Auburn. Like you could play – in the second round, you're looking at either Louisville or Creighton. And in the Sweet 16, you could potentially see Texas A&M, like who beat them up literally 3 days after they clinched the SEC regular season title. So I just think there are a few too many landmines. I think I like that Michigan State team. So gun to my head right now, I haven't filled out a bracket yet, but I like Michigan State, Duke, Florida, Houston in my Final Four.
Well, I love the audacity of Auburn wearing shirts that say "Doubt Us" as in 1 seed. It's just chef's kiss. It's great. It's Kirby Smart-esque levels of propaganda. It's beautiful.
If you're going to quote the great John Rothstein, then if you plan on filling out a bracket, keep kerosene nearby, which John Rothstein
doesn't keep a can of kerosene nearby.
Hopefully he doesn't, because he's going to be in Cleveland sitting courtside with Alabama and Robert Morris on Friday. So I would hope that he doesn't have any flammable liquids that could cause trouble there.
I'm going to follow him around on his off days and count how many times he just says "this is March" to himself.
Maybe we'll get to meet him.
Fingers crossed. He seems like a guy that loves him some college basketball. So it'll be kind of
take a selfie with him like you do the mascots.
I guess he's technically the March Madness mascot. So that might be something that I have to do. I didn't take any selfies when I was in Nashville. Instead, for those of you watching on YouTube, I came away with a brand new memento that's right here in my background, a nice little SEC men's basketball tournament sign. So clearly, for those who are watching on YouTube, we got a nice little collection going. So we're going to see how much that can grow over the next month.
Do you replace as they go, or do you just add on to it if Alabama keeps moving?
I think I've just kind of added on to it because I have a few others from other events that I've got. Like I've got the Rose Bowl media work sign from a few years ago when that was Alabama, Michigan. I went and helped out our friends at USA Wrestling with the Olympic wrestling trials last year. And so I have a big Team USA sign that's got the wrestling Olympic trials logo on it. But like some of these signs are on the floor because I'm just trying to figure out the best way to kind of put the collage together in the background. So that SEC tournament one was pretty easy to just kind of slide. Like it's literally sitting on my couch and leaning against the wall. So it's for those who are watching on YouTube, I'm running out of room. So if there's any interior designers out there that want to come help me,
I'm sure they love designing around signage. We'll call you Klepto Cody. You just steal every sign you see.
Look, a lot of people think that their media credentials are good enough to be like, look at what I covered. No, I want the actual sign of the event that I covered. I think that's pretty cool. Mike can attest to this. He watched me steal that little smaller circle. I'm pointing at it for those watching on YouTube, that little March Madness sign out of crypto.com arena after Alabama beat UNC. So I'll keep you guys up to date on my signage adventures. But that's all we've got today. We'll be back later this week. We'll talk a little bit more hoops. We'll also talk some spring football since that is back in action this week as well. In the meantime, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports. We got a lot of basketball and spring football content coming at you guys this week, and we don't want you to miss a thing. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We will talk to you all again soon.